n'hésite pas, et c'est à cause de ça, dans tous les cas, les managers et Antoine.
Okay, here we go. Panel. If you care about the panel content, please come sit right in front of this speaker. We've got a lot of chairs. It's a little hard to hear toward the back, so we apologize, but we know you all want to know about tree security, and who better to tell you than these lovely gentlemen who are led by our own CTO, Oisin. Please give them a warm welcome.
Thank you very much, everybody. This is my first time moderating a panel, and I've been enjoying figuring it out. So, the plan for this panel is to talk about ensuring no private key in smart contract security, and this is something very close to my heart, and something that keeps me up at night. A lot of proof of stake is all dependent on how secure your keys are ultimately at the end of the day. So with me today we have Michal from Nethermind Research, we have Sebi from Chainproof, and we have Yves from Bitcoin Suisse. And we have a good diversity of research, insurers, and stakers and custodians that can really cover all of the remit in terms of hardware and software security and how to keep all of this stake secure. And just before I kind of dig into some of the questions, I wanted to kind of explain some of the things that can kind of go wrong for maybe some people that are maybe a bit not sure of it. So nodes, they need to be secure because if you can compromise a node, you can probably get the private keys. Private keys, it more or less is evident that they should be private, you shouldn't lose them. And smart contracts is maybe one of the lesser understood ones. Very important that your smart contracts are secure. We'll talk a little bit about that more at the end. But generally speaking, there's many ways for staking to go wrong. And as of right now, it hasn't gone wrong enough in my head, if I'm honest. And in that regard, to date, in the last 3 years of the Beacon chain, there's been about 400 slashings, over 70 events, and as far as I know, almost all of them from double signing. And that's maybe one of the more milder issues that could go wrong. And the first question I have for my panelists is, what will the first $10 million slashing be a result of? Will it be a double signing? Will it be a hack? Will it be something else? But maybe I'll start with Michal. What do you think the first major slashing on the network will be?
So, extrapolating from past events, I would say it will be most probably operator failure. I think at some point we will see slashing events that comes from hacking.
So hacking a client, or you mean hacking the operator?
Yeah, hacking operator.
The thing that concerns me the most is potentially someone finding a 0 day in the client and basically taking control of multiple operators, just getting a foothold on their infrastructure and doing sort of a mass correlated slashing event, which could be after an extortion event or something.
Yeah, I would have originally considered, let's say, operational issues, but then there's two main things. Number one, DVT is gonna be in place probably by the end of the year in many operators, so that just reduces the probability anyway. And then there's the discussion of removing the initial penalty, the initial 1 ETH penalty. So if the status quo would prevail, then I would say operational risks. But I just think in those 6 months or so until everybody has DVT, probably there's not going to be such a big operational issue anymore. I mean, we've been the second biggest. We had 99 validators at once slashed. And that was really just because we were with a long chain of issues really late in reacting. So that was 200,000 damage. So to get to 10 million damage, you need a lot of validators to get slashed. So I don't think operational issues lead to so many slash validators. That's why I have a tendency to clients, whether by code issues or hacks, but just the fact that you have such a big surface being affected at once. Probably.
Awesome. I'm glad everyone is kind of agreeing with me that operationally risk will go down a huge amount when people move to DVT, because you can run 2 nodes in a distributed validator cluster and nothing really goes wrong. Things complain a little, but you're not going to get slashed. So certainly I do think the operational failure will kind of go down in that regard. But I want to touch on what Sebi said around kind of compromise of a client, and I might ask Michal to like walk people through what could really happen there, both from compromising maybe a client's supply chain or finding a route in through like kind of a remote code execution attack. But what's so scary about somebody, let's say, compromising a Nethermind client? Like, what happens next?
So it really depends. So execution client itself doesn't sign anything right on Beacon chain. We have consensus layer client for that. But if it happens that, I don't know, like someone keeps execution layer client and consensus client on the same machine, like not in containers, then of course like hacking the one can affect another. So hacking execution layer client can make the client to convince consensus client that some block is valid if it's invalid. Okay, so this is not related to slashing, but it would like cause like invalid block to become like part of the canonical change if we are talking of like super majority client. On the other hand, if we also have like withdrawal keys on the same machine, then hacking execution layer client can cause like all the funds to be withdrawn. So that's something much bigger. So yeah, I think like the execution client itself is like not like something that is like very dangerous, but like how you actually like make sure that only like valid and healthy communication between the clients go on. I think this is like the super important part here.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things about a compromise in like any one piece of the software can mean that the whole node is at like risk. It's not so much that you can do a whole lot of damage by producing an invalid block and like losing a bit of mev rewards, but as kind of Michal alluded to, a lot of people keep the private keys and the execution and the consensus layer.
I hope they don't.
Okay. I have bad.
Yeah, I'm naive.
And similarly, we even have software like remote signers. These are generally a step in the right direction in that you're meant to like firewall away the stuff that does the signing from the nodes that are connected to the internet, and execution and consensus and the distributed validator client are generally all connected to the internet. And in best practice, you're better off having the private keys on another box and like a real firewall between them, rather than like praying that there's no container escapes in Docker, because honestly I would not hope for that, because there's been many of those. And similar, to be honest, the like Web 2 space has had such a long time trying to work on like key exfiltration that we really haven't seen a lot of that yet. Sometimes you can look at these demos in like kind of Web 2 places where they can like extract a private key by a flashing LED on the computer, and they can watch the way it flashes and like eventually like get a private key out the door. We're just like so not ready for things like that in a lot of the staking world. And it's what kind of brings me to my next question, which is maybe a little bit contentious, but like, wouldn't be an interesting panel if it wasn't like contentious. I have this fear that there are a lot more private keys stolen than we already know about. It's been 3 years, and generally speaking there are no known kind of stolen private keys right now. And my grand hypothesis here is if you steal 1 or 10 private keys, you can't really profit from it. You can get them slashed, that sucks. You can maybe like steal one proposal, and then somebody figures out, my validator keys have been compromised, I better like exit them all and recreate them. But it's extremely difficult to like come up with a profitable attack. Best is like, short the market and then flash people and hope that the market goes down. But where things kind of change is the more private keys you have, the higher the stakes, the more chance that like things can be really severe. If you have 16% of all private keys, those 16% lose half of their ether. And my big fear is that there are people that steal private keys and just say nothing and say, I'll kind of keep collecting them and gathering them. And then sooner or later we're going to find out the hard way that that's kind of happened. And I kind of want to ask the panel, frankly, do you agree with me? Because I got a bit pushback beforehand. They were like, I don't know if I have anything to say other than like raw speculation, but I'm going to ask you to speculate anyways, Yves. Do you think people have stolen any private keys, or do you think everyone is perfect OPSEC?
Well, definitely not. But I have absolutely no data to build an opinion on that. I can say how we do it because we're custodians as well. We build our own custody solution, so we have basically, I think, quite a good attitude towards OPSEC. Maybe not so much about operational stability, but about, against key compromise, I'm very positive. But then again, what's the portion of non-large operators that are more suspect to that? I mean, I don't know how many solo stakers we have out of this 1 million validators. Not going to be many.
5,000.
Yeah. So those definitely are suspect, but then that's a really small percentage. And I hope that all the big ones that have like 0.5% of the network or more have decent OPSEC.
I hope so too, but I'm actually not convinced the solo stakers are as big a risk, because most solo stakers, there's one human with the keys. You probably don't have to answer this, but I'm assuming there's a lot more than one person in Bitcoin Suisse with access to the private keys.
No. I mean, well, on the validator side,
yeah, not the custody.
We have, let's say, quite a lot of controls on the process side. And access to remote signer is highly supervised, so there's only 4i and 6i principles that come into place, so 4i at least. But in the end, those two could collude, so definitely. So 2 out of 4 infra engineers would have to collude to get access to the validator keys.
That's fantastic. You're doing much better than the standard if you have 2 humans that have to collude to like lose keys. This, and now I'm going to go to Sebi and ask a little about you as an insurer. For those who don't know, Chainproof is one of the leading insurers of staking operations. And before deciding to insure anyone, you probably go through a bit of due diligence, questions, stuff like that. What do you think of Chainproof when you're kind of evaluating a node operator and when it comes to insuring their stake? What are you looking at? What are you afraid of? What's the red flag?
Yeah, we definitely look at their general security posture, and that includes key management. That's one of the key things, actually. But we also look at what other countermeasures they have in place, right? Like you just mentioned, separating the Web3 signer from the execution client, having multiple layers, just all the bells and whistles in terms of monitoring and alerting, all the flags that they need to set, like persistent, database for anti-slashing, and based on a myriad of these kind of small things that include Web 2 security and Web 3 specific things, we decide, okay, this is a project that we would tolerate the risk for. But yeah, what keeps me up at night is also these kind of 0 days in clients, right? And by default, we exclude that from our policies. It's a pretty tough risk to gauge.
What about some multi-client approach?
Yeah, definitely. Multi-client approach solves that. So that's why we were excited about Oval, because they enabled that. So yeah.
And if you could pick one thing that tentative customers often fall down on, you're like, nah, you can't be at that. What's the biggest sin that you see going?
Yeah, the biggest sin is basically running everything on the same machine.
Okay.
Putting everything in there, yeah. That's it.
Maybe just to add, there's one thing that just popped in my mind. Again, I think the client side is the one we have least control about. And we have been until recently, very, let's say, non-diverse on the client side. We're using a minority client as a validator, but on the as a consensus layer client, but on the execution side we were mainly Geth. We're now we're down to below 50% gap, and we're reducing that further. But still, that's the part we have least control about. Except when like diversifying, we can not do anything. But then on the process side, for example, that comes from the custody side, and custody attitude. Like when generating validators, we typically have a proper key ceremony that has a shizzle ton of controls around it, basically the same that we do for custody keys. And we typically will generate like 10,000 validator keys at once, and then we secure them in small batches, and again have them in tamper evident bags, have them stored in multiple bank safes with access controls how to get them. So if anybody wants to set up a new set of validator keys, then they have to go through the same procedure to access the keys. But then at the end, when you actually run the validators, then you have a few infrastructure people that could theoretically pollute.
Still though, that's a lot of good thing.
Yeah, I'm thinking about these stolen keys. I think that we can make some experiment, look at the black market and see like who is selling the keys, right? Because like small actors are not going to gather like enormous number of like stolen keys. They will try to monetize them and sell it to some bigger actor.
I've never considered checking the dark web for a market on validator keys, but like, yeah, maybe that's an interesting one.
I wonder how big this market is.
Yeah.
I'm guessing North Korea has a bunch of them.
Yeah, 100%.
Just gathering more and more.
They should become operator.
But funny you mentioned them. I was like looking up the stats. So there's been $1.5 million in like slashings. In 2022, North Korea stole $1.7 billion of crypto, and they were attributed to 44% of all hacks in the space. I'm sorry, I guess, yeah, the crypto space. I don't know specifically, it was a BBC reference. But funny enough, last November at Istanbul, I was on a panel and someone said, like, you know, what's the biggest challenge for DVT in the next 6 months? And I said, Lazarus Group. And I stand by that statement. I can't really talk a whole lot of it, but there is a lot of interest in anybody in the staking and anybody in custody. Please, if you ever get a message from me that doesn't look right, don't click on any PDFs. If you get a sus job offer, it's like, run this software. Don't do it. There's a great post by Taylor from MetaMask who was like talking through an example of somebody getting hacked just last night. And the killer is that they don't execute the hack until months later. They wait and they kind of hide it, they delete all the messages, they erase all the tracks, and you have no idea how they got in, because then they can kind of like go further. But yeah, I frankly would put a decent chunk of money on the fact that North Korea have at least some private keys. How much? You know, nobody's going to know. Will they get in through a remote code execution? I don't really think so. My biggest fear, frankly, is just DevOps is clicking dodgy links. Like that's kind of happened before. I know, like, you know, Lido recently had to like exit quite a large amount of stake because, in credit to them, one of the developers were like, "Hey, I clicked a phishing link, and now we should probably rotate all these keys." Fair play to them. I actually would love to see them back in the operator set, because otherwise people won't, you know, admit to it a second time around. But yeah, if there's one thing keeping me up at night, it's getting fished. But yeah, the last question is on the Solidity side. There's particularly a lot of the, like, you know, tokenized, like, liquid staking side. There's a lot of like upgrade keys going along. I know if I were an Eigenlayer, I'd be a bit sweaty about being on that multi-sig that was $16 billion. Is that something that you guys consider? I'd imagine in Bitcoin Suisse you do not have upgrade keys or editability. You just say like, no, let's go straight to a cold wallet, like nothing weird, but...
Yeah, absolutely nothing with upgrades. And also, when we ever list a protocol or like want to provide access for our clients to a protocol, we have dedicated protocol team, security team that does more or less the same as an audit company does. And upgradable smart contracts are at first a really big red flag. So you need some really good arguments why they have to be like that. Or our clients have to sign just 2-3 pages of disclaimers, and then they can go with it.
Yeah, and I suspect Sebi's probably not ensuring multi-sig compromise.
Well, I mean, you know, there's this double-edged thing here, because you need upgradability if you find a bug to fix it, right? So that could be a feature, you know, in itself. So I think, you know, as long as you have a very good process when it comes to upgrading, and you have like, I know some people, they have like a nice security governance form where they give keys to like multiple, legitimate organizations, and they follow a very strict process when it comes to approving an upgrade, and they don't just push new code to production, right? I think that works, and gives a bit more legitimacy, and also, a seeming decentralized, protocol, because it's not just them who decide, okay, we're gonna just push something now. So I'm not, an anti-upgradability guy. Like I think in terms of security, upgradability could be a good thing.
Right on that, the last big case we had that was when we had big client amount to list Matic staking. Matic is just a set of Ethereum smart contracts for staking. And at the end you have a multisig with 4 entities that are, we're being told that those 4 entities hold the keys, but there's like 7 or 9 keys, and 9 I think, and we don't know which entity holds how many. Is it even true that those entities hold those keys? There's not more than just a wiki entry. And whoever has the majority can change the whole proxy implementation contract, so could just walk away with billions. So these are, we did list it eventually, but as I said, with a number of pages of disclaimers. But it really depends also on what upgradability you have. Can you completely change the implementation, or is it just parameters that you can change, etc.?
Yeah, I completely agree. The other one is the time lock nature. It's like sometimes it's safer to have a time lock. You can be like, something's weird going on, I want out. But if there's a compromise you need to fix, then all of a sudden you're like advertising to the world for like 9 days, how to exploit the existing one or something. So it's a real kind of, damned if you do, damned if you don't when it comes to like upgradability. So yeah, I can say from my side, we just stayed away from upgradability. I come from the era of crypto where it was like immutable, non-upgradable, all that kind of stuff. And I feel much better not having any ability to like mess with anyone's withdrawal keys. But as I said, the other side of that is like bricking contracts, and there was times where we've like worried about like, is something gonna be bricked, and like, is there a load of money gonna be stuck? You don't want that either, but yeah, it's like, it's all trade-offs, unfortunately. Michal, you gonna weigh in there?
I think I'm on the side of like robust upgradability actually. And I think like some countermeasures we can think of are like related to key rotation and like invalidating cold keys. So setting up like new keys, new key shares that give the same private public keys. Talking about Lazarus, if we have time. So I think like every company in like Web3 space that keeps some money or operates some money is the target. So like people who might or might not be North Korean hackers are applying to companies, right? Like they send like CVs. They're appearing on calls. Like currently, like the quality of these calls are usually not that great. They often have the camera off. We always make sure that camera must be on for an interview. But with all like AI advancement, deep fakes, like even camera picture cannot be trusted anymore. I mean, for now it can, but I think I give it like half of a year or something. To be like it will be very difficult not to onboard such people to the company. And when these people are in the company, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it's like a huge step for them towards like it's like new fishing.
For sure. And just as we wrap up, I wanted to give everyone like one last like soapbox moment of, we're talking about, node, operator, private key, security. What's like the biggest thing that you think people should be aware of, take away from this, that a year from now you can be like, I told you so? Like, what's that one takeaway for people about how to, stay safe and not get rugged?
Like my view is, you need multiple layers. So I think the technology that you guys have developed is a great layer, but you shouldn't throw away everything else, right? You should use as many layers as possible, even the pre-existing ones. Some of them become obsolete with OBOL, but like it's great to have these multiple layers, and not just technology but also processes. So I think you can't just, like in the smart contract world, it's, you know, everyone just wants one audit and then they're done. You know, they're like mainnet, don't care about anything. Like, I'm done with security. Like, similar to there, you need multiple things, not just one.
I actually agree. Like the multi-layers and like robustness in thresholdizing everything. Right? Like, don't rely on a single machine. Don't rely on a single person. Make sure that your software runs in different machines.
I also think you should assume every single element to be able to fail or to be compromised. And I recall when I first talked to Jim McDonald, a testant, and how they set up their, set up their infrastructure, where like, and really each layer, they say things can fail. It could be a client, it could be a data center, it could be a country, it could be a hyperscaler, it could be whatever. So they have redundancy on all levels to make sure that if it's compromised or failed, you're still resilient. So that's number one, and number two is really the processes. So many people look at tech and forget that people are the biggest attack vector.
Yeah, that was going to be my equivalent soapbox moment. Is everyone loves like audit the solidity, like find the big brain hack, but like so much of it is just a phishing link or like catching a human or something silly like that. So yeah, sometimes like the worst hacks are from like the dumbest ways, and it's like not all this fancy stuff. So that'd be my one to be like OPSEC. But yeah, this has been this panel. Thank you very much for listening, and I think Max will walk us through the next panel. Thanks so much for your time.